The grand palace on Helios Prime was a place of beauty and power. Its golden walls shone like the sun itself, and the air smelled of sweet flowers from the many gardens that surrounded it. This was the home of the Zorthians, a race known throughout the galaxy for their elegance, wisdom, and unmatched beauty. The Zorthian queen Lyra was their most beloved leader. She was known not just for her outer beauty, but for her sharp mind and caring heart. Her presence was enough to make even the strongest of leaders bow in respect. She had led her people with kindness and strength for many years. Today, the palace was hosting an important event. Diplomatic representatives from different species across the galaxy had come to meet the queen. Among them was a small group of humans. The humans were known for their bravery, resourcefulness, and strength, but they were also known for their unpredictability and wild nature. To many of the more established species, they were still considered somewhat of an unknown. Adam was one of those humans. He wasn't particularly famous or powerful, but he was known for his role as a soldier. He had fought in many battles, and his leadership had earned him the respect of his fellow soldiers. He was strong, kind, and honorable. But there was something else about him that set him apart. He wasn't afraid to speak his mind. In a room full of people trying to impress the queen, Adam was different. While others spoke in carefully chosen words, Adam spoke with honesty and passion. When Adam entered the grand hall, his eyes scanned the room, taking in the other diplomats and leaders. Most were dressed in elegant clothing, their faces adorned with smiles meant to impress. Adam, on the other hand, was dressed in a simple uniform. His posture was confident but not arrogant. He didn't feel the need to put on a show. His eyes were clear and his heart was open. It didn't take long for Queen Lyra to notice him. She had been listening to the various representatives, nodding politely and offering her thoughts on matters of trade and peace. But when Adam spoke, there was something different about him. His voice was steady, but there was a sincerity in it that caught her attention. He didn't try to flatter her, didn't try to win favor. Instead, he spoke about the importance of unity, of understanding one another despite their differences. Lyra was used to hearing speeches filled with diplomacy, but this was different. Adam's words rang true in a way that made her pause. She'd always valued honesty, but it was rare to hear it so plainly spoken in a room full of politeness and pretension. His words seemed to strike at something deep inside her. It was not just his words, but the way he spoke them, without fear, without pretense. He was not trying to impress her. He was speaking to her as an equal. As Adam finished his speech, the room fell silent for a moment. Everyone else seemed to be waiting for the queen's reaction. Lyra, however, was lost in thought. She had never met someone like him before. There was something about him that intrigued her, something that made her want to learn more. It wasn't just his words, but his presence. He carried himself with a quiet strength, confidence that didn't need to be shown off. The other representatives continued to speak, but Lyra's attention was still on Adam. She watched him as he mingled with the other diplomats, his body language easy and relaxed. He seemed to be comfortable in his own skin, not concerned with trying to fit in with the others. Lyra admired that. She admired his simplicity, his strength, and his honesty. Later that evening, after the event had ended, Lyra found herself unable to shake the thoughts of the human soldier. She had seen many diplomats over the years, each one more polished than the last. But Adam was different. He didn't try to be anything he wasn't. His charm was in his authenticity. That was something Lyra valued deeply. It was something she hadn't seen in a long time. The queen decided to learn more about Adam. She had access to the most advanced technology in the galaxy, and it was easy for her to gather information. She requested a full report on him, hoping to understand why he had affected her in such a way. She learned that Adam was born on Earth, a planet known for its harsh conditions. It was a world of constant struggle where the strongest survived, and the weak were left behind. Adam had risen from humble beginnings, working hard to make a name for himself in the human military. As Lyra read about his past, she found herself becoming more and more fascinated by him. He wasn't perfect, far from it, but there was something about his journey that resonated with her. She had always faced challenges as a queen, and she admired those who worked hard to overcome their own obstacles. Adam's life story was filled with struggle, yet he had never given up. That was a quality she respected, but it wasn't just his resilience that drew her to him. There was something deeper, something that went beyond his achievements. It was the way he viewed the world. Adam didn't see people as their species or their titles. He saw them as individuals, each one deserving of respect and understanding. He didn't care about the differences between humans, Zorthians, or any other species. He believed that peace could only come when people saw each other as equals, not as enemies. The more Lyra thought about it, the more she realized that she had never met anyone like him. He was brave, kind, and honest. And yet there was something about his simplicity that made him stand out among the many diplomats and warriors she had met. She began to wonder if perhaps there was something more to this human than anyone had ever realized. Later that night, as Lyra stood in her private chambers, looking out over the beautiful gardens of the palace, she couldn't help but think of Adam. She had always believed that she was destined to rule alone, that no one could truly understand her. But now, as she thought about the human soldier, she wondered if that might not be true. She didn't know what it was about him, but she felt a connection, a bond that she couldn't explain. For the first time in a long while, she felt something more than the weight of her crown. She felt. Lyra stood by the window in her palace, her thoughts swirling like the stars in the night sky. The soft breeze from the gardens brushed against her skin, but it did little to calm the unease that had settled in her heart. She could still hear Adam's voice echoing in her mind. His words had struck a chord in her, words that were so simple, yet so powerful. He wasn't like the other diplomats, the ones who always spoke with calculated precision and practiced gestures. Adam spoke with honesty. And that honesty had captured her attention in a way that no one else had. She had always prided herself on her wisdom and ability to lead her people. As the queen of the Zorothians, she had been groomed to make decisions that would benefit her empire, decisions that would keep her people safe and prosperous. Yet as she thought more about Adam, she began to wonder if there was something more to life than duty and tradition. Could someone like him, someone from a distant world, actually challenge her way of thinking? Could he become more than just another ally? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. The next morning, Lyra summoned her most trusted advisor, General Corin, a tall, powerful Zorothian who had served her for many years. His loyalty to her was unquestionable, and his insight was always valuable. Corin entered the room, his heavy boots echoing on the marble floor. He bowed deeply, his sharp gaze never leaving her face. "Your Majesty, you requested to see me?" Corin asked, his voice deep and respectful. "Yes, Corin," Lyra replied, turning away from the window and facing him. "I want you to gather information on the human soldier, Adam. I wish to know everything about him." Corin raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "Adam, Your Majesty? The human who spoke at the diplomatic event?" "Yes, Lyra," said her voice steady but filled with an emotion she hadn't expected to feel. "I need to know about him, his background, his accomplishments, his character. I want to understand why he affects me so." Corin was silent for a moment, studying his queen. He had served her for many years, but he had never seen her like this. Her curiosity was rare, especially when it came to someone outside her own species. He nodded slowly, sensing that this was important to her. "As you wish." "Your Majesty," Corin said before turning to leave the room. Lyra watched him go, her mind already racing. She had never asked for such detailed information about anyone before, and she wondered why it felt so different now. There was something about Adam that made her want to understand him more deeply. It wasn't just his words, it was his presence, his honesty, his strength, the way he carried himself with such quiet confidence was also unexpected. Later that evening, Corin returned with the information she had requested. He placed a datapad on the table in front of Lyra, bowing once more before stepping back. Lyra glanced down at the screen, her heart beating a little faster. As she began to read, Adam had been born on Earth, a planet in the farthest reaches of the galaxy. It was a harsh world, one where survival was never guaranteed. The humans had fought for centuries to carve out a place for themselves in the galaxy, and many viewed them as brash and impulsive. But Adam's story was different. He had come from humble beginnings, growing up in a poor district of Earth, despite the odds. He had joined the military at a young age, rising through the ranks due to his hard work, bravery, and intelligence. As Lyra read further, she learned that Adam had fought in several key battles, each one shaping him into the leader he was today. He wasn't a noble or a politician. He wasn't someone who had been born into power. Adam had earned everything he had through his own strength and determination. Lyra couldn't help but admire that. But it wasn't just his achievements that caught her attention. It was his outlook on life. According to the reports, Adam was known for his unshakable belief in equality. He didn't see species or titles. To him, everyone was deserving of respect, no matter where they came from. He believed that true peace could only be achieved when people saw each other as equals, not as enemies. His words, spoken so simply during the diplomatic event, had been a reflection of his beliefs. Lyra found herself drawn to this philosophy. She had spent so much of her life focused on the needs of her people, on the rules and traditions that governed her world. But Adam's beliefs challenged that. Could peace really be achieved through understanding and equality? Could a queen like her, who had always ruled with authority and tradition, change the way she saw the world? As the days passed, Lyra couldn't shake the thoughts of Adam from her mind. She found herself thinking about him during meetings, during moments of quiet reflection. She even found herself seeking out his presence whenever they met again. She noticed the way he carried himself, the way he spoke to others, the way he treated everyone with the same respect, regardless of their rank or species. One day, Lyra found herself alone in the palace gardens, walking among the vibrant flowers that bloomed year-round. The sun was setting, casting a soft golden light across the landscape. She sat on a bench, her mind filled with thoughts of Adam. She couldn't deny it any longer. She was curious about him. In a way she had never been curious about anyone before. She had felt a connection to him from the moment they had spoken. But now she wondered if that connection was something deeper, something more than just admiration. The wind rustled the leaves of the trees, and for a moment Lyra closed her eyes, letting the cool breeze wash over her. She couldn't explain it, but something about Adam felt right. She had never allowed herself to entertain the idea of a relationship with someone outside her own species, especially not a human. But now, the thought didn't seem so impossible. Lyra stood up, feeling the weight of her decision pressing on her. She wasn't just the queen of the Zarathians. She was a leader, a symbol of tradition and power. If she chose to follow her heart, it could change everything: her empire, her people, and the galaxy itself. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure what was right anymore. All she knew was that Adam had stirred something in her. Something. The days following Lyra's growing curiosity about Adam were filled with tension. The quiet whispers of the palace had turned into a hum of speculation. The Zarothian court, once a place of harmony and calm, was now a battlefield of opinions. The queen, once adored by all, was now the subject of heated debates among her most trusted advisors. Lyra sat on her throne, her gaze steady as the members of the council gathered before her. The grand hall, decorated with golden tapestries and intricate carvings, was filled with the soft sound of murmurs. The council members, each a powerful figure in the Zorothian Empire, looked at her expectantly. They had been discussing the recent diplomatic event, but their focus had shifted. They wanted to know about her interest in Adam, the human soldier who had captivated their queen. "Your Majesty," General Korn began, his deep voice breaking the silence, "it has come to my attention that you've shown great interest in the human soldier, Adam. I must ask, is this true?" Lyra looked at Korn, her face calm, but her mind racing. She knew this moment was coming. The council would never simply let her have personal feelings without questioning them. She had already made up her mind. She stood tall, her regal presence filling the room. "It is true," Lyra said firmly. "I believe there is more to Adam than what the galaxy has assumed about humans. his words at the diplomatic event. They were unlike any I have ever heard. There is something in him that I cannot ignore. A murmur of disbelief ran through the council members. Their expressions ranged from shock to confusion. This was not what they had expected to hear from their queen. The Zorathian people had always prided themselves on their beauty, grace, and wisdom. They had always seen themselves as superior to other species, especially humans. The thought that their queen, the most powerful and revered figure in the galaxy, could be so taken by a human was almost unthinkable. What you are suggesting? Your Majesty is unprecedented, said Lady Thea, a member of the court known for her sharp mind and even sharper tongue. A human as a mate? It is unheard of. The very idea goes against everything the Zorathians stand for. Lyra's gaze sharpened. She had known this would be the reaction, but she couldn't back down now. I understand your concerns, Lady Thea, she said calmly, but I believe that sometimes the most unexpected things can lead to the greatest change. Adam's words, his honesty, his strength, they have made me see the world in a new light. I refuse to dismiss him simply because of his species. The room fell into a heavy silence. The council members exchanged looks, unsure of how to respond. Corrin stepped forward again, his voice more measured this time. Your Majesty, he said, I respect your decision, but I must remind you of the consequences. The Zorathian Empire has never mingled with humans in this way. There are factions within our empire that will not accept such a choice. We cannot afford to alienate our people. Lyra's heart clenched at his words. She had never been one to back down from a challenge, but she also understood the weight of her decisions. She was not only the queen, she was the symbol of Zorothian power. Her actions were closely watched, not just by her people, but by the entire galaxy. I know the risks, Corrin, Lyra said quietly, but I believe in change. The galaxy is not what it once was. It's the old ways of thinking, the belief that one species is superior to another must end. It's time to look beyond that. Thorin bowed his head, his respect for the queen evident. If that is your decision, Your Majesty, then I will support you. But I still advise caution.
Ow.
There are many. Who will challenge you? Lyra nodded. I will face whatever challenges come my way. The council members remained quiet for a moment before Lady Thea spoke again, her tone less harsh than before. And what of the other species, Your Majesty? What of the other leaders and their opinions? The humans may be a young and powerful race, but they have enemies. If you openly embrace one of them, it could cause a ripple effect across the galaxy. Lyra looked out the window, her thoughts momentarily drifting. She knew the stakes were high, but she also knew that peace and unity were worth fighting for. She couldn't let fear dictate her decisions. It was time for the galaxy to evolve. And perhaps Adam was the catalyst for that change. I will meet with the other leaders, she said, her voice strong. I will explain my choice and seek their understanding. This may not be easy, but I believe it is the right path. As the council session came to an end, the members filed out of the room, each of them deep in thought. Lyra remained seated. On her throne, her mind racing. She had made a bold decision, and she knew it would not be popular. But she couldn't deny the connection she felt with Adam. She had to see where it could lead. In the days that followed, Lyra met with leaders from other species across the galaxy. She explained her decision to embrace Adam and her belief in unity. Some leaders listened with interest, while others were openly skeptical. There were those who ridiculed her choice, calling it a mistake. But there were also others who saw the potential for change. They saw the bravery in Lyra's words, and some even began to wonder if the old ways of thinking were holding the galaxy back. Adam, meanwhile, had no idea that his words had set off such a storm in the galaxy. He was busy with his duties, continuing to work alongside the Zorothian soldiers, learning their ways and proving himself to them. But there were moments when he would catch Lyra's gaze, and in those moments, he felt a connection. Something unspoken but undeniable. He didn't know what it meant, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. As the days passed, the tension in the palace grew. Lyra had made her decision, and she wasn't backing down. But she also knew that the road ahead would be difficult. There would be those who would try to tear her down, to stop her from choosing a human as her mate. but she was ready. For the first time in a long while, Lyra felt a sense of hope. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for... The days that followed Lyra's bold decision were filled with uncertainty. The galaxy was watching, and the Zorathian Empire was shaken to its core. The idea of a human as the Queen's mate was not only shocking, it was unheard of. The Council, despite Lyra's determination, had become a battleground for opinions. Some still supported the Queen's choice, but many others quietly questioned her. The air in the palace was thick with tension. It seemed as though every corner of the empire was divided between tradition and change. In the midst of this, a new threat emerged. The Zalorian Dominion, a powerful and aggressive empire that had long been a rival of the Zorothians, saw this as the perfect opportunity to strike. Their military was vast, and their tactics were ruthless. They had always viewed the Zorothians as weak and indecisive. Humans' involvement in the empire only made it more of a target. They believed that the Zorathian leadership was distracted by their internal struggles. They intended to use that to their advantage. The message came to Lyra through a secure communication channel. A video transmission from the Zalorian fleet appeared on her screen. The face of the Zalorian General Varnock appeared, his eyes cold and calculating. "Queen Lyra," he began, his voice harsh, "it seems your empire is more divided than I thought. You have chosen a human as your mate, and for that, you will pay. The Zalorian Dominion will destroy the Zorathian Empire unless you renounce your alliance with the humans and submit to our power." The message ended, and Lyra was left staring. At the empty screen, the threat was clear. Zalorians would not hesitate to strike, and now they had a reason to do so. Lyra knew that she couldn't allow fear to dictate her actions. The Zorathian Empire had faced greater threats before, and she had led them through those dark times. This would be no different. But there was another challenge ahead, one that had nothing to do with the Zalorians. Lyra had to prove to her people, to her council, that her decision to choose Adam was not a mistake. She needed to show them that humanity had value, that they could be an ally, not a liability. This wasn't just about her feelings for Adam. It was about the future of the Zorathian Empire. Lyra called for a meeting of the council. This time it was different. The room was filled with the most powerful leaders of the empire, and their faces were serious. They all knew what was at stake. The room was tense, and for once Lyra felt the weight of her position. She wasn't just a queen anymore, she was a symbol of change. It's a beacon of hope for those who believed in something different. "Everyone knows the threat we face," Lyra began, her voice strong but calm. "The Zalorian Dominion is coming. We cannot ignore them any longer. But we also cannot back down. I will not renounce my choice. Adam is not just a human. He is a warrior, a leader. He has proven himself time and time again. I believe in him." Room fell silent. The council members exchanged wary glances, but none of them spoke. Lyra continued. "I am calling for a test," she said. "A demonstration of strength and unity. I will lead the charge against the Zalorians, and Adam will stand by my side. If we succeed, it will prove that the Zorothians are stronger than ever, and that humanity has earned its place among us. If we fail, then you will have your answer." A murmur ran through the room, but this time there was no outcry. The council knew that Lyra had made up her mind. She was going to fight, and she was going to do it with Adam by her side. The test would not only be about their military might, but about proving the value of Adam, proving the value of humanity. The decision was made, and the preparations began immediately. The Zorothian fleet was mobilized, ready to face the Zalorian threat head-on. But it wasn't just the fleet that would be needed. Lyra knew that to truly succeed, she would need to lead her people personally. The Zorathians were a proud people, but they needed to see her strength, her conviction. They needed to see that the queen was not just a figurehead, but a leader who would fight alongside them. Adam, though still uncertain about the weight of this responsibility, was ready. He had always been a soldier, trained to fight, to lead when necessary. But this was different. This wasn't just a battle between two empires. was a battle for the future of the galaxy, for the unity of two very different species. It was a test not just of military strength, but of trust. Trust between Lyra and him, and trust between their people. The day of the battle arrived, and the Zorathian fleet, with its powerful warships, met the Zolorian fleet in the outer reaches of the Helios system. The Zolorians had underestimated the Zorathians, believing their internal struggles would weaken them. But Lyra, with Adam by her side, had other plans. The battle was fierce, and for hours the two fleets clashed in the void of space. The sky was lit with flashes of light as ships fired upon each other, their weapons leaving trails of destruction in their wake. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she stood at the command center, her hands gripping the controls. Adam stood beside her, his calm demeanor providing a sense of strength she had come to rely on. They were not just leaders, they were partners, and together they would prove to the galaxy that nothing, not even the greatest of threats, could break their bond. The tide of the battle shifted when Adam, using his knowledge of human tactics, suggested a bold move that caught the Zolorians off guard. The Zorothian fleet, under Lyra's command, launched a counterattack that pushed the Zolorians into retreat. The Zolorian fleet, once so confident in their victory, found themselves outmatched and outsmarted. As the last of the Zolorian ships fled the battlefield, Lyra stood in silence, staring at the vast expanse of space. The battle had been won. But more than that, the test had been passed. The Zorothians had proven that they were not just a people of beauty and grace, but of strength and unity. And Adam, the human soldier, had shown them all that even the most unlikely of allies could become the most. The battle had been won, but the cost was high. As Lyra stood on the command deck of the Zorathian flagship, the weight of the victory sank in. The Zorathian fleet had pushed back the Zolorian forces, but the toll had been heavy. Some ships had been lost, and many brave warriors had fallen. Yet despite the scars of the battle, there was a sense of pride in the air. The Zorathian people had fought together, united by a common cause. And at the heart of that victory was the queen and the human soldier who had stood by her side. Lyra turned to Adam, who was standing quietly beside her, his eyes fixed on the stars outside the window. There was no need for words between them. They both understood the gravity of what had just happened. But in that silence, there was something more, a shared understanding. A bond that had grown stronger with each passing day. The ship's crew had already begun the task of tending to the wounded and repairing the damaged vessels. The sounds of engines worry and the hustle of the crew filled the air, but in that moment, it felt as if everything had slowed down. Lyra could feel the connection between her and Adam deepening. She had always prided herself on her ability to remain focused, to not let personal emotions cloud her judgment. But with Adam, everything was different. He'd become more than just a companion in battle. He had become someone she relied on, someone who brought out a side of her she had long buried. Adam, Lyra finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "You saved us today. Your plan turned the tide of the battle. Without you, we might not have one." Adam glanced at her, his expression unreadable. But his eyes held something that made her heart race, a quiet understanding, shared sense of purpose. "I did what I had to do," he replied simply. "We did it together." The Zorathians fought bravely. "I just gave them a chance to win." Lyra nodded, feeling a surge of emotion she wasn't used to. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel vulnerable, to let go of the walls she had built around her heart. She had always believed that leadership meant being strong, being distant, but Adam had shown her that true strength wasn't about holding back, it was about trusting those around you, about allowing yourself to be vulnerable when needed. As the hours passed, the Zorathian fleet made its way back to Helios Prime. The stars outside the ship's windows began to fade as they entered the atmosphere of their home planet. The city below was alive with lights, a beacon of hope in the darkness of space. But for Lyra, the brightest light was not the city below, it was the man standing beside her. When the ship finally landed, Lyra led Adam to the palace. The palace, once a symbol of strength and tradition, now seemed more like a symbol of change. The Zorathian people had seen their queen make a choice that defied centuries of tradition. And as she entered the grand hall, there was a hush in the air. The court had gathered to witness the return of their queen. But this time, it wasn't just the queen they were watching, it was her companion, the human soldier who had stood by her side. The tension in the room was palpable. The council members, still divided on Lyra's decision, watched carefully as she and Adam entered. Lyra could feel their eyes on them, their judgment heavy in the air. But she stood tall, her head held high, her heart steady. "Your Majesty," Corin said, his voice deep with respect, "we have won the battle, but now we must prepare for what comes next. The Zalarian Dominion will not rest. They will return." Lyra turned to face the general, her gaze unwavering. "I know," she said, "and when they do, we will be ready. We must be united now more than ever. The Zorathians and humans must stand together as equals." A murmur ran through the court, and Lyra could feel the eyes of the council on her. Some of them were skeptical, others uncertain. But Lyra was resolute. She had made her choice, and she wasn't going to back down. She would prove to them that humanity had a place among the stars, that Adam was not just a symbol of that change. He was a vital part of it. Adam, standing quietly beside her, felt the weight of the moment. He had never imagined that his life would lead him to this point, to standing by the side of the most powerful queen in the galaxy, in the heart of her empire. He had come to the Zorathian world as a soldier, just another man from Earth, but now he was something more. He was her mate, her partner, and he knew that together they could change the galaxy. After the formalities, the council meeting adjourned, and Lyra and Adam made their way to the private chambers. As they entered the room, Lyra turned to Adam, her eyes filled with gratitude. She reached out, her hand resting on his arm. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Adam looked down at her, his expression softening. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "We're in this together." Lyra smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached her eyes. In that moment, she knew that their bond was more than just a political statement. It was real, and it was only going to grow stronger. Later that evening, Lyra stood by the window of her chambers, gazing out at the stars. The palace was quiet now, the hustle and bustle of the day fading away. Adam was beside her, standing in silence, his presence a comfort. For the first time in a long time, Lyra felt at peace. "We've come a long way," she said quietly, almost to herself. "But the hardest part is still ahead." Adam nodded. "We'll face it together." Lyra turned to him, her gaze intense. Yes, together. The galaxy had changed, and so had she. What had once seemed impossible, a queen and a human soldier, united, was now a reality. They had proven that strength wasn't just about power. It was about unity, trust, and love. And together, they would face. The days after the victory against the Zalorians were filled with change. Lyra's decision to choose Adam as her mate had sent ripples throughout the galaxy. Some believed it was a mistake, others thought it was a bold move, but no one could deny that it had shaken the very foundations of galactic politics. The Zorathians, once so proud of their beauty and grace, were now part of a new world, one where species no longer ruled by the old traditions. It was a world where alliances could be built on trust and unity, not just power. Lyra stood on the balcony of the palace, looking out at the stars. The night sky over Helios Prime was clear, and the galaxy stretched out before her in all its vastness. She had spent her life thinking about her people, her empire, and her duties as queen. But now she was thinking about something else, something more personal. Adam stood beside her, his presence a constant comfort. The world around them was quiet, but the future was anything but. Lyra knew that the decision she had made had consequences, both good and bad. But she also knew that the future of the galaxy depended on what came next. This wasn't just about her, it was about everyone. I never imagined things would change like this. Lyra said softly, her voice carrying the weight of everything that had happened. I thought I was alone in my role as queen, that I had to carry all the responsibility by myself. Adam turned to her, his eyes filled with understanding. You're not alone anymore, he said simply, we're in this together. Lyra smiled, the warmth of his words soothing the tension in her heart. It wasn't just the power of the Zorothian Empire that mattered. Now it was the strength of their bond. They had proven that they could face the greatest challenges, but the real test was what came after the battle. How would they lead? How would they shape the galaxy now that everything had changed? As the days passed, more representatives from different species came to Helios Prime. The news of the Zorothian Queen's decision had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The human alliance, once considered insignificant by many, now stood as a key player in galactic politics. Leaders from different corners of the galaxy sought meetings with Lyra and Adam, eager to understand their vision for the future. The council meetings became a place of heated debates. Some questioned the wisdom of Lyra's decision, while others praised her for her bravery. But as the days went on, it became clear that change was inevitable. More and more species began to see the value in the new alliances, and the old ways of thinking slowly began to fade. The Zorothian Empire, once a beacon of tradition, was now a symbol of progress. The galaxy was on the brink of a new order, and Lyra and Adam were at the heart of it. One afternoon, Lyra and Adam were called to a meeting with representatives from the Draxian Confederation, a powerful military alliance from a neighboring system. The Draxians had been one of the most vocal opponents of the Zorothian human alliance. Their leaders had openly criticized the idea, arguing that it would weaken the galaxy's balance of power as Lyra and Adam entered the meeting room. The Draxian leaders were already seated at a large table, their expressions cold and serious. The room was filled with tension, but Lyra remained calm. This was another test of their ability to unite the galaxy, even with those who were reluctant to accept change. We have called this meeting to discuss the future of the galaxy. Lyra began, her voice steady. The Zalorian threat has been pushed back, but there are still challenges ahead. It is time to choose whether we will continue to fight amongst ourselves or work together to ensure a peaceful future for all species. The Draxian leader, General Orin, leaned forward, his sharp eyes narrowing. You expect us to believe that the human alliance is not a threat? You expect us to trust the very species that has spent centuries fighting wars without any true unity? Adam stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. The humans have learned from their past, he said, his voice calm but filled with conviction. We are not the same as we once were. We seek peace, not war. We are willing to fight for that peace. There was a long silence in the room. The Draxians were known for their strength and pride, but they were also wise enough to see the value in unity. General Orin exchanged a look with his advisors before turning back to Lyra and Adam. Perhaps you are right, Orin said, his voice softer now. But it is not just words that matter. Action. Prove to us that this alliance is strong. Action. Prove that the humans can be trusted. Lyra nodded, understanding the challenge before her. We will prove it, she said firmly. Together, we will show the galaxy that unity is stronger than division. The meeting ended with a tentative agreement, but it was clear that the seeds of change had been planted. The Draxians, once fierce opponents of the human alliance, were beginning to see the potential for a new future. And with each passing day, more species followed suit. The Zorothians and humans had become a symbol of hope, showing that even the most unlikely of allies could change the course of history, as the days turned into weeks. Lyra and Adam worked tirelessly to strengthen their alliances and build a new future for the galaxy. It was not an easy task. There were still those who opposed their union, those who believed that the old ways were the only way. But for the first time in centuries, the galaxy was beginning to listen. The bond between Lyra and Adam grew stronger with each challenge they faced. They were no longer just a queen and a soldier. They were partners, united not just in their love for each other, but in their vision for a new galaxy. Together, they would lead the galaxy into a new era, one where strength was measured not just by power, but by the ability to bring people together. As Lyra stood beside Adam, looking out at the galaxy they had helped to shape, she knew that their journey was far from over, but she also knew that together, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. They had faced the greatest challenges, and they had come out stronger. The future of the galaxy was no longer a question, it was a promise. And with that promise,